The old woman was already awake when the parking lot lights flickered off at 5:47 in the morning. Nora knew this because she had been watching them from the window of the diner, where she'd worked the overnight shift for 11 years. The lights always cut out at the same time. The city hadn't bothered to fix the timer since 2019. She noticed things like that. She noticed most things. She untied her apron, folded it over the counter stool, and pushed through the back door into the October cold. Her grandmother's apartment was 6 blocks east. Nora walked it every morning. She didn't own a car. She'd sold the last one to cover her grandmother V's hospital copay 2 winters ago and hadn't thought much about replacing it since. There were more important things to think about. The streets were quiet that time of morning. A delivery truck idling outside a bakery, a man walking a dog who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Nora pulled her jacket tighter and kept moving. She heard it before she saw it. The sound was wrong in the way that certain sounds in certain neighborhoods at certain hours are just wrong. Too sharp, too deliberate, too many voices layered over one another in that particular pitch. That means someone is enjoying something they shouldn't be enjoying. She stopped at the mouth of the alley between Cafferty Street and the parking structure on Roanoke. There were 4 of them. They were in their 20s, maybe early 30s. 2 had bats. One had what looked like a length of chain coiled around his fist. The 4th stood back slightly, filming on his phone, turning to grin at the camera every few seconds like he was producing content. On the ground, half propped against a dumpster, was a woman in her 60s. Her name was June Calloway. Nora didn't know that yet. All Nora knew was that the woman's lip was bleeding and her glasses were on the pavement in 2 pieces, and she was holding her wrist against her chest the way people hold a broken thing. Beside June, leaned up against the alley wall, was a motorcycle. Not the beat-up commuter kind, a real one, a '94 Harley Softail, the chrome still clean despite the scratches along the tank. June had been riding it for 22 years. Her late husband had helped her pick it out at a dealership in Shreveport, and she'd ridden it to his funeral and to her granddaughter's graduation and across Route 66 twice, and she would have kept riding it for 22 more years if the chain hadn't slipped at the light on Cafferty and sent her skidding into the curb at the worst possible time in the worst possible block. The one with the chain said something Nora couldn't fully make out. June said nothing. She was looking at her broken glasses on the ground. Nora walked into the alley. She was 5'4". She was 29 years old. She weighed 132 pounds, and she was carrying a set of diner keys and a phone with a cracked screen and $3 and change from her tip jar. She had no business walking into that alley, and she knew it, and she walked in anyway. "Hey," she said. All 4 of them turned. The one filming lowered his phone slightly, like he was recalibrating whether this was still content worth capturing. The one with the chain tilted his head. The 2 with bats looked at each other. "Walk away," the chain one said. "This doesn't involve you." Nora looked at the woman on the ground. Then she looked back at him. "She needs an ambulance," Nora said. "And you need to back up." He laughed. It wasn't a real laugh. It was the kind of laugh men use when they want you to understand that they think the situation is beneath their attention, and so are you. "Girl, you don't know what you walked into." "I know exactly what I walked into," Nora said. "I also know there's a camera across the street on that parking structure that's been running since the city installed it in April, and I know you've been in this alley long enough that the timestamp is going to be very clear." She paused. "I work nights. I know every camera on these 6 blocks. Do you?" She didn't know if that camera was working. She honestly didn't know. But she said it the way she said everything, like it was the only version of the truth that mattered. The one filming glanced up at the parking structure. The one with the chain looked at him. That look, that 2-second exchange of uncertainty was enough. "Let's go," the chain one said, and his voice had lost its shape. He said it like a man who has suddenly decided that whatever this was, it wasn't worth it. They left the alley the same way they'd come in, and the one filming put his phone in his pocket like he was erasing something, and then it was just Nora and the woman on the ground and the October cold and the sound of the motorcycle chain still clicking faintly in the wind. Nora crouched down. "Can you move your wrist?" she asked. "I don't think so," June said. Her voice was steadier than Nora expected. "It's not broken. I'd know if it was broken. I've broken a wrist before." "Okay." Nora sat down on the cold pavement next to her, which she later thought was probably a strange thing to do. but it felt wrong to stand over someone who was hurt. "I'm going to call 911. Is there anyone else I should call?" June looked at her for a long moment. She had the kind of eyes that had been through enough things that they didn't startle easily anymore. "My chapter," she said. "Call my chapter." The paramedics said June's wrist wasn't broken, but the way she'd caught herself on the pavement had badly sprained it and bruised 2 ribs, and they wanted her to come in for imaging. June agreed, which surprised Nora, because by then she'd started to get a sense that June Calloway did not typically agree to things that inconvenienced her. Nora gave a statement to a patrol officer who wrote everything down with the careful detachment of someone who had filled out a lot of these forms and was not optimistic about their outcomes. He took her contact information. He thanked her. She walked home in the morning light thinking about V's medication refill, which was due Thursday, and the utility bill, which was already a week late, and the fact that her shift started again at 8 that night and she hadn't slept yet. She was not thinking about the woman in the alley. She was trying not to, anyway. V was awake when Nora came in. She was always awake. The television was on, volume low, and she was sitting at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a mug of something that had long gone cold, and she looked at Nora the way she always looked at her, like she could read every mile of her. "You're late," V said. "Had a thing. What kind of thing?" Nora took off her jacket and hung it on the hook by the door. She told V what had happened. She left out some parts. V was 71 years old and had a bad heart, and Nora had developed over the years a careful system of deciding which information was useful for V to have, and which information would only make her worry at 4 in the morning. V listened to the parts she was given. Then she said, "You sat down on the ground with her?" "She was on the ground. You could have crouched." "I was already crouching, and then I just sat down," Nora said. "I don't know. It felt right." V looked at her for another long moment. Then she nodded. "It probably was," she said. Nora didn't think about June Calloway again for 11 days. Then a woman she didn't recognize came into the diner at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday. She sat at the counter. She ordered black coffee and a slice of whatever pie was left, which was peach, and she ate it slowly and deliberately in the way of someone who is there for a reason that has nothing to do with pie. When Nora came back to refill the coffee, the woman said, "You're Nora Simms." It wasn't a question. "I am," Nora said. "I'm Diane Calloway. June's my mother." She was somewhere in her late 40s with the same steady eyes as her mother and a leather jacket, with a small patch on the shoulder that Nora didn't recognize. "She's been asking about you since she got home from the hospital. She wanted to send flowers, but she didn't have your address. And she didn't want to ask the police for it because she didn't want you to think she'd given your information to anyone." Nora refilled her coffee. "That was considerate. She's very particular about things like that." Diane wrapped both hands around the mug. "She also wanted me to bring you something." She slid an envelope across the counter. Nora looked at it. She didn't pick it up. "I can't take money. It's not money." Nora picked up the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note on plain paper. June's handwriting she would later learn, though she didn't know it yet. The note said, "You sat down. Most people stand over you when you're on the ground. You sat down. I want you to know I noticed that." And below the note was a business card. The front was for an auto shop called Calloway & Sons on Miller Street. On the back, in the same handwriting, "We're hiring. If you're interested, come by Thursday." Nora turned the card over twice. "I work nights," she said. "She knows," Diane said. "She's not particular about what shift." Nora went on Thursday because V told her she had to. She brought her resume, which she'd printed at the library on paper that was slightly too glossy and felt wrong in her hands. She had 2 years of community college and a certification in automotive repair she'd gotten at 23, because she'd needed a skill that paid better than food service, and she'd always understood machines better than she understood most people. She'd never been able to turn the certification into an actual job in the field because the shops she'd applied to had looked at her and made decisions before she'd said a word. She'd stopped applying about 3 years ago. The shop was larger than it looked from the street. There were 4 bays and a reception area, and a wall of awards from the city's Small Business Association, and a signed photograph of a woman on a motorcycle at what looked like the Grand Canyon with her arm raised like she was greeting the horizon. June was behind the reception desk when Nora came in. Her wrist was wrapped. She looked exactly like herself. "You came," June said. "You asked," Nora said. June took the resume and looked at it for a long time. She asked about the certification program. She asked about the diner, how long, what hours, what kind of volume. She asked questions that had nothing to do with the alley and everything to do with whether Nora was the kind of person who showed up when she was supposed to and kept her word when she gave it. Then June put the resume down and said, "We've had the same part-time diagnostics position open since spring. I'll be honest with you. The last 3 candidates I interviewed had 4-year degrees from technical programs, and I didn't offer either of them the job. You know why? They couldn't handle the diagnostic software," Nora guessed. "They couldn't stop explaining things to me," June said. "I'm 64 years old and I've been rebuilding engines since before their parents met. What I need is someone who will look at a problem and see it, not explain what it theoretically might be." Nora said nothing. She understood that to be the correct response. "Thursday and Saturday, 6 to noon, June said. "It'll overlap with your nights for a bit. Is that manageable?" "I'll make it work," Nora said. "I know you will," June said. "That's why I asked." She started the following Thursday. The diagnostics bay was quieter than the main floor, which she appreciated. There was a logic to it that felt like relief after 11 years of the constant noise of the diner. The orders and the complaints and the fluorescent buzz and the sound of the door opening every 4 minutes. In the diagnostics bay there was a car and a problem, and a set of tools and the particular silence of a puzzle that wanted to be solved. The other mechanic on that shift was a man named Octavio, who had been with Calloway and Sons for 12 years, and communicated primarily through eyebrow movements and single-syllable affirmations. He showed her the system on her first morning, and then left her alone to figure out the rest of it, which she later understood was his way of deciding whether she was competent. He decided she was after about an hour. The eyebrows went up slightly. She took that as a compliment. The weeks passed. Nora still worked her nights at the diner. She was still 6 blocks from V's apartment, and still watching the parking lot lights cut out at 5:47 every morning. She was still $3 in tip money most shifts, and still calculating the difference between the medication cost and the balance in the account that V didn't know Nora knew about. But something had shifted, not dramatically, not in the way stories often shift with some clean turning point that announces itself. Just gradually, the way a room gets lighter when dawn comes and you haven't noticed until you realize you can see without the lamp. She started recognizing the regulars at the shop, the woman who brought the same 2003 Civic in every 6 weeks, and always had a different story about how the noise started. The retired teacher who drove a truck that belonged in a museum, and whose face collapsed with relief every time Nora told him it was fixable. The teenage girl who came in with her mother's car and clearly knew more about it than her mother did and was just waiting for someone to notice. Nora noticed. She started spending her breaks reading in the shop's back office, which had a small library of service manuals and a coffee maker that had been there since 2003 and still worked. June would sometimes come in and they would talk. Not about the alley, not about what had happened, but about other things. About the shop. About a particular engine rebuild that had given June trouble in 1998 and what she'd eventually figured out. About the city and the way it was changing and what that meant for the blocks around Miller Street. One afternoon in December, June said, "My son is moving to Atlanta in February. He's been running the day operation." Nora looked up from the manual she was reading. "I'm not going to replace him," June continued. "I'm going to restructure. Move Octavio to day lead. Bring on one more person if I can find the right one." She paused. "Full-time, benefits, salary, not hourly." Nora said nothing. "I'm not offering it to you right now," June said with the directness that Nora had come to understand was simply how June communicated, without apology or decoration. "I'm telling you it exists, and I'm telling you that in my opinion, which is the one that matters in this building, you are the most capable person I've seen do diagnostics since Octavio, and Octavio has been doing it for 18 years. Nora looked at the manual. Then she looked at June. "I'd need to think about whether I could leave the diner," she said. "I know," June said. "Think about it." V found out about the shop offer the same way V found out about most things. Nora told her at the kitchen table over coffee that had gone cold. V listened to the whole thing without interrupting, which was unusual. Then she said, "Nora Simms, if you turn down that job, I will haunt you." "You're not dead," Nora said. "I'll figure it out," V said. Nora laughed. It came out louder than she expected, which happened sometimes. the laugh catching her off guard, which was the best kind of laugh. V smiled, and the kitchen was warm despite the January draft that came through the window frame they'd been meaning to reseal since October, and for a moment Nora felt the specific ease of being known by someone who has been watching you your whole life and still chooses to stay in the room. She sat with you, V said. On the ground. She was the one who was hurt, Nora said. That's not what I mean. V looked at her. She built that whole shop from a single bay in 1989. She rode motorcycles when women didn't ride motorcycles, at least not in the circles she was moving in. She sat across that table and looked at what you were and not what she expected you to be. V paused. That's a person worth working for. I know, Nora said. Then you already know what you're going to do. She gave her notice at the diner on a Thursday evening. Her manager, a tired man named Walt, who had been tired for at least as long as Nora had known him, shook her hand and said she was one of the best he'd ever had, and that he hoped she knew that. She said she did. She didn't entirely, but she was learning. In March, 4 months after the night in the alley, a local news station ran a segment. One of the patrol officers who had taken Nora's statement had mentioned the incident to a reporter who had been working on a story about bystander intervention in urban areas. The reporter tracked Nora down through the diner. Nora almost said no. She said yes because June told her to. You don't do it for yourself, June said on the phone. You do it because if one person sees it and the next time there's someone on the ground, they sit down, then it mattered. The segment was 4 minutes long. It ran on a Tuesday evening. By Thursday, it had been picked up by 2 national outlets and a morning show. The comment sections were full of people who wanted to talk about the larger things. About race, about neighborhoods, about who gets protected and who doesn't, about the particular kind of courage it takes to walk into an alley when you have no real reason to expect it to go well. Those conversations were real, and they mattered, and Nora was glad they were happening. But what she thought about, when she thought about it at all, was something smaller. She thought about V at the kitchen table with cold coffee and the television on low. She thought about June in the alley with her glasses in 2 pieces on the ground, looking at them the way you look at something you can't immediately fix. She thought about Octavio's eyebrows going up slightly on her first Thursday morning and what that had meant and how it had felt. She thought about how most of the most important moments of her life had happened quietly, without announcing themselves, on ordinary mornings when she was tired and cold and had other things she was supposed to be thinking about. The full-time position at Calloway & Sons started in April. Nora took it. She was 29 years old. She had a certification and a cracked phone screen and a grandmother who would haunt her if she made the wrong choices. She had 6 blocks of city streets. She knew well enough to walk them without looking. She had the particular knowledge that every camera on those streets was in a specific location, which she'd memorized over 11 years of overnight shifts, and which had been true when she needed it to be true, and had not been embarrassing to have said even if it turned out otherwise. She had the habit of sitting down on the ground next to people who were already there. It was not, she understood, a dramatic thing. It had not made her brave. Bravery, if she thought about it, wasn't a quality you acquired in a single moment in a cold alley at 5:47 in the morning. Bravery was just what accumulated, quietly and without ceremony, when you kept showing up to your own life in the small ways that didn't earn you anything except the right to keep going. The parking lot lights on Cafferty Street still cut out at the same time every morning. Someone finally called the city about it in November. They fixed it in December, Nora noticed.